So, shall we start with introductions?
Yes.
Cool, cool. Ivana, do you want to start?
Okay, how are we gonna do introductions?
Should we just do like name, pronouns, and like maybe like your position in the QPOC project?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Ivana, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm the mental health officer in QPOC project.
Vinay.
Hi everyone, I'm Vinay. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm one of the content creators for the QPOC project.
Cool, thank you. My name's Maya. I'm the founder of the QPOC project, and my pronouns are she, her. It's weird how when you press record, like you tense up, but it's okay. We're fine. We're
I
chill.
know. Okay, I will take a breath.
Yeah. So yeah, so should we just start with like just a chill question of how has 2020 been? How was 2020, 2021, the pandemic, lockdown, just the past 2 years of madness? Let's go from there. Vinay, why don't you start?
In terms of myself, I feel like I'm in a much better place after it all, to be honest, even though there were obviously we've all had like really difficult times during the whole lockdown. But yeah, like I said, it's given me a good opportunity to have some important conversations with people. I came out to family during that period, so I've come out a lot happier now. But yeah, it's been intense.
How was the coming out for, like, what was that like?
That was, I mean, it varies with who I talk about. So, I've spoken about this online a bit about like coming out to my mum, which was a confusing experience because I kind of tricked myself into thinking it was a positive experience. And then I realized afterwards that it wasn't actually a positive experience. Because when I first told my mum I was gay, she didn't seem to have a problem with that. And she said, oh, it's fine that you're gay. And I thought, oh, wow, she accepts me. This is amazing. She's not embarrassed of me at all. And then that was followed by, because it's not like anyone needs to know. It's not like anybody needs to find out about that. You can might get married to a man. Again, I thought, oh, great. But just make sure you do it abroad when none of our family need to see, is what she'd say afterwards. And I'd be like, I can't work out if this is a positive response or not. But, the more and more I started speaking to other people, I realized that she was uncomfortable with my sexuality and just wanted to keep me hidden away. And then that was then confirmed when she said to me, just make sure your uncle doesn't find out because he's the type of person to perform an honor killing. And like, that's one of the things that's really stuck with me since then. But, I know it sounds like it's been a really rough process coming out, but like I said, it varies with who I told. When I told my dad was really angry with my mum and he said, you know what, Vinay, go put it on Instagram right now. Like, let's go to Pride together. Let's tell all the family that you're gay. Text your aunties right now and tell them. And it was amazing. It's like, and the crazy thing is, like, you don't know how it's going to go, right? And I for some reason, I thought my mum would be really chill about it. And it was the complete opposite way around. And I guess part of that might be to do with culture or whatever. But, I don't want to blame it on my culture either. I don't want to say my culture is homophobic because then I came out to my grandma, who's a generation above my mum. She's 80. She lived in Kenya most of her life. And yeah, I'll tell you a bit about the story when I came out to my grandma. Obviously, like, there's a little bit of a language barrier because she speaks mainly Gujarati. And I have no idea how to say I'm gay in Gujarati. Just figuring out how to express it in English. So, Gujarati was a bit of a challenge. And the way I decided to translate it, what I exactly said was, ba hu chokri sathe lagan nathi karwana, chokro sathe lagan karu che, which translates to, I'm not going to get married to a girl, I'm going to get married to a boy. And her immediate reaction was, what, already? You're so young, like, you can't get married right now. And I was like, no, like, I don't mean right now, like, that's just the only way I could word it. But what about the fact that I said it's going to be a boy? And she was like, oh yeah, I don't care about that, but please just, like, make sure you get your degree before you find a boy.
Grandma came through.
And I was so shocked. I really did not expect it at all. Because there's this 80-year-old woman who's probably been brought up with, like, different views that you wouldn't expect to have such an amazing reaction, compared to my mum, who's lived here most of her life, who did have a really problematic reaction. But it was amazing. And then since then, I'm like, why do I care what anybody thinks? My 80-year-old grandma loves me for who I am. So Now I'm just happy to be me, and it was a really great experience. So yeah, like pros and cons of 2020.
That's, thank you, Vinay. I think 2020 was such a, well, I say 2020, I mean like sort of since COVID hit, I feel like, of course, there's been so many like ups and downs and like mostly downs, but I feel like being inside for like a whole year and a half has like let everyone sort of reflect on their identity and their relationships with people, with family, with friends. And I feel like a lot of it is sort of like just remove all the stuff that you don't want in your life. Like that's sort of like what I've got just off social media and like the conversations I have with people now. It's very much like life is too short. Like just spend the time with the people you want to spend time with, and those who aren't good for you, just like they're not supposed to be part of your life anymore. And I feel like that's like very much what I've got from that. Not just me, but like in general, like that's sort of the gist of like conversations I have with people now. And I feel like a lot of that plays into like sexuality and gender identity. And like at the end of the day, like if you're still surrounding yourself with people who don't accept you because of your sexuality and your gender identity, like those people are like probably not going to be in your life for very long for a good reason. But what about you, Ivana? Like how is it all for you?
I feel like it's kind of a blur. I'm like, wait, what did happen during lockdown? But I think there's like a push to live as authentically as possible. And like, I think before I would see like, oh, but I live in this environment, or I have these people in my life, and there would be barriers to why I can't live as authentically as possible. But then I really had like a fuck it moment. Like, why do I have to kind of, I don't know, censor myself or not live in the way that makes me happiest? And that the people that are in my immediate circle aren't the only people in the world. And I think like during lockdown, it exposed me to so many like online, like, well, QPOC project, things like that. I'm like, there are so many people in this world that there's no way I can surround myself with people that don't allow me to be like my true self, or like even like help me get to that point. So yeah, lockdown was just kind of finding those communities online. And it's made me so happy because I'm just like, I don't know, one person not accepting you or one person not understanding you, that's not the end of the world. There are just so many people. And yeah, as you said, I can't remember that meme. What was that you mentioned the other day?
It was like that I was supposed to be at home for a 2-week quarantine and now I have no gender. That was it. But it's so true. It's so tea. But yeah, carry on.
Yeah. So I feel like I've come out just living so authentically to myself. And also like just getting like that community courage. Like I feel so strong and feel so empowered because you know that there are so many people that share your experiences, even different experiences, but you just know you're not alone. And like I go back to like baby Ivana, young Ivana, thinking I'm the only queer African woman in this world or African girl in this world. I'm thinking there is no one that, you know, fancies a girl. There's no one that comes from where I come from that thinks that way. Like I'm just like, I don't know, a glitch in the system. Something went wrong here and I need to correct it. And like going back to like feeling empowered, like the things that are happening globally, and I say to my siblings or our queer siblings as well, I think that's also been an eye-opener too. Because I think in Pride, we can kind of think like it's great that in England, we can't really be prosecuted for being like queer or anything like that. It can be debatable, like there's still hate crimes, there are still like all those separate things within our families and cultures that we might go through. But like on that kind of scale where the law says it's illegal to love in the way we do, like we don't have that. And like seeing how many people in the world are continually oppressed to this day, it's just like, okay, I've come over my hurdle of like coming out, but now there are so many other things in like the wider queer community globally that they're going through. Like recently, 21 people in Ghana have been like imprisoned, and you're thinking, what laws are there to protect them and like to release them? And there aren't any, unfortunately. And it's just like where some people feel so powerless, and we have been able to get so much power from communities that we've been able to form. It's like, okay, this needs to spread across now. There's still more work to do. Pride was a protest, it still is. So I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, my sexuality isn't something that I think about every day. Like it's so normal to me. to a point where, like, when I was younger, I would wake up think, oh my God, I'm so gay. What am I going to tell everyone? So now I'm like, I really don't care. So I've come across that hurdle and I'm like, there's still so much work to do. And I'm just ready. Like, I'm just ready for that. But yeah.
I love that. And I completely agree with like a lot of the things you just said, you know, specifically about thinking about the people, you know, like obviously we're in the diaspora, like privileged to have the rights that we've got here. And the point you made about like the internet being like a massive help, I completely relate to that as well. And I went to a talk yesterday where they were saying that, you know, for every one person in India who has access to the internet, there's at least one person who doesn't. And it made me realize that, wow, like the amount of help I've received through social media, meeting people like, you know, through the QPOC project, seeing all these like activists sharing things, you know, activists that actually look like me. There are people in India who aren't able to see that and still must be, you know, feeling completely othered and like, just like you said, like a glitch. And I think, yeah, this pride, it's really important that we still remember that, you know, there are still people that we need to fight for.
Yeah, Vinay, like you were saying this yesterday as well about sort of like that, like with when you come from another culture, it's like, oh, like I love you, you're my child, but I'm also like, I'm kind of like tied to my tradition, I'm tied to like the homophobia or like the racism that's rooted in that culture as well. And it's like distinguishing the two. I feel like that's something you were talking about yesterday.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like this is another thing that, you know, like I spoke a bit about my mum already, but my mum, you know, and my uncles and everyone, like they've definitely made little jokes about another gay person that we've got in the family. But when I told her I was gay, she was like, oh, that's fine. And there is this whole, when it's my child, it's a different thing. Do you know what I mean? But it's also like, there's just so much pressure on not letting anybody else find out, which is just what I found crazy. I was like, why do you care so much about what other people think? Like, you know, like Ivana, like you were kind of saying, you love, of course they're going to love you, like it's your mum, right? You expect unconditional love, but sadly there are still some families, and I think this is kind of what happened with me and my mum, where, you know, when I told other people about it, that was the cutoff point for her. And you know, I've not spoken to my mum in 9 months now, and it's not been 9 months since I came out to her, it's been 9 months since I came out to my uncle. And that's what made her stop talking to me, which I just found crazy, because I was like, the opinion of someone else is affecting your relationship with me, and it's not even my fault. Like I've not even done anything. But yeah, you know, it is this whole idea that, you know, they say, you know, my mum would say that she loves me because I'm her child, but she still puts certain things above that, which is what I'm still like trying to figure out.
Yeah, for me at least, when I was president of the LGBT society at King's, that's one of the reasons I kind of left, and I kind of quit quite early on, because it was quite literally, I was representing people who were not like me, not just in terms of like my complexion and like stuff like that, but it's also like your perception of like queerness is not my perception of queerness at all. Like your queer journey is not the same as mine. Like everything you have experienced in your sort of queer journey is nothing like what I've experienced. And it doesn't mean that we can't have good times together, but it means there is always a line that I can't cross, they can't cross, or there's like a bit of like, we don't understand each other.
Maya, what you mentioned as well about, you know, the KCL LGBT society, I think is quite interesting as well, because my experience is there as well. I mean, when I moved out of home, I was so excited to go to uni, because I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get to meet other gay people. I'm going to get to go to gay club nights. I'm going to have gay friends. It's going to be so much fun. And I went to the Freshers' Fair, and I'm not joking, it was just 3 white people with blue hair. And like, there's nothing wrong with blue hair. It looks fab, but it was just one very specific type of person, none of which represented me or looked like me. And, you know, why are they going to care what I have to say? Because they've not been through what I've been through. They're just not going to relate to it. And, you know, I turned back from the Freshers' Fair, and I just never attended one event at all. I didn't give my email address. I just wasn't interested in it at all. And for a whole year, I didn't do anything gay for first year, because there wasn't a space that I felt like I could have.
And I think it's like, we need very realistic advice and like people around us, because sometimes being in those spaces, it's like, why don't you just come out today? Like, what's the issue? Tell everyone you're gay. And it's just like, okay? And like, I think there are so many different layers as like queer people of color we actually have to think about, and we need other people around us to say, wait, have you thought about this, this, and this, and this? And there's alternatives to like living authentically. I think the biggest thing is to live authentically in your head, because that is your biggest barrier. Like, you don't need, being out is normally like the last hurdle. Like, by the time you've come out, you need to fully like feel okay with yourself to like an extent, and like really understand who you are. And like living authentically in your head is the most important thing, because for like us, if we don't do that initially and we come out, that experience of coming out can literally break you. So I feel like the point that I came out was like the point where I was like, listen, bitch, if I'm kicked out, if anything happens, I'm good. I know who I am. I can go. And it was just like that level of like, okay, I've got myself here. You kind of, I think, Vinay, you mentioned like generations and like coming out to different family members. When I came out to my mum, she mentioned like something about my auntie and like her being in a long-term like relationship with a woman. And she just dropped it in there. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, it literally like shook me. And like, I think you see how hush hush so many things are. And like, maybe a lot of our relatives or family members that grew up in environments where it wasn't okay to be queer have had like relationships, like queer relationships, and it wasn't accepted. So that's the only reason why they married a man or a woman, and they had children. But it's actually very common, and it's just a lot of things just suppressed and like hush hush.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I think, like, when I talk about that one step back, I think all of that is rooted in colonialism. Like, not to be that person that always talks about colonialism, but I am. And like, I'm not gonna lie, like, it is rooted in colonialism, and that's why like so many people of color, a lot of resentment that we have towards white people is that, you know, we are still dealing with sort of like educating our parents or our grandparents or our family who are still homophobic, but they're homophobic because of like colonialism, because, you know, in my case, you know, Spain colonized Mexico, colonized Latin America, and reinforced that Catholicism, which then reinforced homophobia. It's so privileged for like, especially with this whole coming out culture, it's so privileged. It's completely and totally rooted in privilege, because it's like, you don't come from a country which was once colonized and which is now subsequently, you know, has a lot of homophobia, has a lot of racism, like has a lot of things that we're still trying to work through and trying to navigate. And it's like, you're trying to like keep the good relations with your family and with your parents, but at the same time you're trying to live authentically. And then at the same time you have the sort of like speaker voice on top being like, come out to your parents, you're not really your authentic self unless you come out like this, that, and the other. And it's just like, there's so much to balance when you're a queer person of color, and it's like a lot of that is like, there's so much to sacrifice, like as Vinay, like you've been through. Like,
no, I think that's, you know, it's really important thinking about that overlap. I mean, like, another thing I think as well is thinking that our identities, they're so interconnected. Like, we don't have the privilege of dealing with being queer one day and then like dealing with being brown another day. Like, it's all merged, and it's such a task that you have to like try and work on. And again, it's this, I know I've brought it up already, but like the being a step back, but like just having to do so much more work than a white gay person. And like, I don't know if they know that. Do they recognize that we have to do that to them, you know?
I think like another thing that I've noticed as well doing the QPOC project is that like, and a lot of people think because we're the QPOC project, we're QPOC, it means that we're all the same as well. Like, we're all like almost like there's no individual sort of color or individual like we're all like one culture, one umbrella. And it's like, no, like that's actually racist. Thinking that like we're all gonna like, it's all hunky-dory, like we're all gonna get along is a lie, and it's rude, because it's like people have been brought up with different religions, different cultures, different ideologies, and you know, we make it work. We, you know, we set our boundaries, we make it work, we make friendships. But of course there are people who, you know, they're different and they butt heads. So a lot of the time I think people also love to sort of like group QPOC all in this one like cute happy little bundle and think everything's fine, everything's happy. But it's like, you know, we're that navigating a minefield that I was talking about before, that does lead to people butting heads, like it does. But yeah, no, that's just something that I was thinking about yesterday, actually.
like in POC, it's so vast and it's so big. And like we're grouping together because we have shared experiences that others us from like white people. But like within POC, like there are so many like differences, so many things to learn as well. And like I don't think we should be like conflated into like one like happy family. No, like we are able to like share a lot of similarities, but like of course we would have our differences. Of course we would like not get on with certain people. Like it doesn't mean like we're harmonious because of POC. There are so many things within POC that need to even be addressed within our own POC communities and in a general way between like separate POC communities. So yeah, there are so many different things.
Like I wanted to ask you, Yvonne, about this whole like, because you advocate a lot for like queer joy, and I feel like that's something as well, like trying to handle the QPOC project. You get people who come who are like, oh well, I'm queer and I'm a person of color, I want to join the QPOC project because I am both those things. But then you get most people who they join because they are those things, but they also feel very hard done by white queer culture, and you know, they want that space, and they also want that space to vent about all the sort of negativity and all the toxicity that's come with their upbringing and trying to navigate being queer and being a person of color. And it's like trying to strike that balance where we can talk about, as queer people of color, where we can talk about the negatives as well as the positives, even if the positive is really only 20% of the conversation. Like trying to navigate that is so hard, and that's why I respect you so much, because you're consistently trying to talk about queer joy, consistently like trying to elevate queer and cultural joy actually. But yeah, I just wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, I feel like life is so hard and it can be so shit. It honestly can, and no one needs to tell us about the struggles that we experience, the difficulties we experience, because like the things people have gone through, the things we have been through, it's just like I wouldn't imagine that pain or like confusion on anyone. And coming from that space where you can really find comfort in your pain, you can find comfort in feeling alone and isolated. You need people to tell you you deserve joy, because there was a point where I was thinking, listen, I can just marry a guy, and I'm stripping myself from all that joy and the good things I deserve. So I was like, no, like anyone that is queer needs to know they are deserving of joy and they are deserving of happiness, and it is obtainable, because it can really look at a certain point where you're like, this is just not a reality for me. And anyone who says otherwise is living in a fantasy world. They don't know my reality. I can't live in the way they're living. But it's like, no, don't take this as something you can't experience. You can't live in your own truth. Like everyone can. And like, obviously there is a level of privilege to that. But like in modified ways, we can all experience certain amounts of joy and be able to feel joyful, even if that comes from not being ashamed that you're queer.
I absolutely love that. Like this idea of queer joy, and you know, like queer people, like we're often angry at similar things, but like we also laugh together. Like we tell funny stories, we have similar experiences which make us happy. And like there's also so much joy that you can find in queer history as well. Like obviously with Pride Month, there's so many things online that I've been reading, and I'm like, wow, that's absolutely amazing. Like the milestones like reached by some people, like the activists, you know, and you think we're always saying like, oh, don't worry, there's light at the end of the tunnel. But there's so much light behind us as well. Like if you actually look, there's so many amazing things that we as a community have achieved. And I think it's really good that you talk about queer joy, because we often neglect that and think about what we don't have.
I think like also like having been in like white queer spaces, like at university, like I always felt like I couldn't actually talk about anything when I was in like on those Zoom calls or like at those events. Like I felt very much like cat's got my tongue, like I don't know what that expression is, but like I can't actually say anything, because I felt almost as if there's almost more that binds people together in trauma in white queer spaces than there is in QPOC spaces, just in terms of conversation, not in terms of like history and facts, but like when I'm with QPOC, when I'm in the QPOC project, like there's sincere laughter, there's like sincere like conversations, like everything, like it flows, and it just feels like, oh, like these are people that like I actually want to be friends with, like I actually can be friends with, like I can talk about normal things with, I can kind of be myself. Whereas when I'm like not in those spaces, I feel a little bit more like I have to put a bit of like my armor on, and I have to be a bit more sort of like the discussions I'm going to have now are a lot more sort of like I have to be thinking a little bit harder, and like, you know, almost put on my academic voice a little bit more. And
I think a lot of like white queer people, white queer culture don't really talk about the significance of like ancestors, and like even like, I don't even know, like Asian history that is queer, and like Black history, African history that's queer is so significant to us, because those are like our descendants. So it just feels so affirming, like to have those people and to think like they had so much power and strength in their own identity that wasn't even questioned once at the time. But obviously colonialism came in and like we made us question everything. So even the hair that grows out of our heads, the skin color, everything. So I think going back like to our ancestors is so powerful. Like we can have their power, and we do, because we come from them.
It's mad though, like when I think of like LGBT like politics or anything, or when I think of even of like veganism, I think of like white people. But it's like exactly what you said, like actually if you go back to like our, like especially over like the past year and a half, like all of the stuff that's been coming out and like education wise, like you have so much that comes back to like our roots, like in Latin America and Asia and Africa, like of like queer history. And it's like it's so wrong that like colonialism stripped that and like made it into like a white thing, has now made it into a white thing. Even veganism was also something that, you know, going way back belonged to our ancestors as well. So it's just like, it's just such a minefield trying to like feel that attachment when you've also been kind of told that you aren't part of, you don't belong to that.
Can I throw a question out there? So what do you hope for like queer people of color for the future? Like what does it look like to you? Queer people living life in the future. What does our lives look like?
So I've thought about this a lot. Because I also think about it in regards to like the QPOC project and like where can this take us, and like I want every single thing that we do in life for there to be a QPOC alternative of that. So like everything, like accommodation, there'll be a QPOC accommodation as well as just like your ordinary, or like, because they even have like queer accommodation now, QPOC accommodation. You know, clubbing, a QPOC club, not just like a general queer club, not like a heterosexual club, but like a QPOC club. Like I just want there to be an alternative of everything for QPOC, almost as if there were like villages for QPOC, but obviously not. But like just the alternative, having that option, I want that to be there. Because I just feel like that is just the ultimate access to living your best life. Like it really is. I just feel like that's where your friends are, that's where your family, that's where your chosen family is. That's, so it needs to be accessible like that. It needs to be like there's an option for everything you do as a QPOC alternative. I don't know if that made sense, but yeah. What about you, Vinay?
I think for future QPOC generations, I just want them to be able to go to a queer space without having to Google it before to read reviews and see if anything racist has happened there. Like that will be the day. Like I will be so happy when that day comes. Like, because I find myself having to do that. You know, there's so many things that look, even if it's not even if it's just like a, I don't know, if it's just a gay bar, or there's like a gay like spa sort of facility that's open like right opposite where I live, and obviously like it's literally less than a minute walk away, so you'd think of course I'm going to go there, but I'm scared to go there because I see the queue outside and it's all white men. And then I'm googling, I'm like, no, there'll be one review here that says there's been an incident, and I've not seen that review yet, but I'm still scared because I don't want to be the one who has to put that review there either, and I just don't want that to be a problem anymore. But yeah, that's it.
What about you, Ivana?
I think like some people may think like, why do we have to have queer spaces? And like the aim would be so everyone's accepting and we can all merge into one. No, like I do think like it is great we can coexist in a space and be safe. That's one thing. But I do feel like there has to be spaces for us to just live and like be free. And I think like there are so many spaces created for different groups and we don't even question. And this is just another space that we can just really be free. And as you said, Maya, like QPOC for everything. Like we need a space to just exist, and we normalize that. We normalize our existence in these spaces. We normalize our safety in these spaces, and that we can just live and be ourselves. And like, you know, you touched on like, you don't have to Google it. Like this is something that I want to be so accessible. Like someone would recommend it to you, like it's word by mouth. Your next door neighbor called Mary, who has 10 cats, knows about like a place that you can go and have fun with your friends. That's like for queer people. And it's like, that's the level as to which like I want it to QPOC people to be on. Like, you know where we can go, you know where we can be safe, and it's so normal, and it's not even like an additional thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's wait.
I think we've had such a good conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy I've shared the space with you all wonderful people today. And even though Pride is not in person this year, I'm so happy we've been given a space online, because COVID has really shown us how accessible spaces can be online. From QPOC Project to Black Pride, I'm so happy we've had this space. And who knows, in a few years or next year, we'll be able to be in person, celebrating, but also have online spaces where we are loud and proud and queer. And yeah.
Yeah. I think I couldn't have said it better myself with Anna. Thank you so much, UK Black Pride, for having us. And please, for anybody who wants to join the QPOC project, you can find us on Instagram at QPOC Project, and our website is in the bio there. But thank you so much for having us. We had a wonderful time. It's lovely to discuss these things, and happy Pride to everybody. Happy Pride. All right, take care, everyone.